This is the Friday Rugby Preview on Borders Rugby Radio with Stuart Cameron.
Hello and welcome to the Friday Rugby Preview, and what a week it's been, with Hawick doing the double for the first time in 21 years and the South getting off to a flyer against Edinburgh at Netherdale. So Dale Clancy and I will be chatting about that, and also looking forward to round 9 of the Kings of the Sevens, which takes place tomorrow. That's happening at Riverside Park in Jedforest. Well, Dale, safe to say, one of the best weeks in Borders Rugby history, I think.
Yeah, it was a huge week. It was, started obviously at the weekend with Hawick winning the double, which was, in terms of just in brief, it was a great game to watch. It was intriguing because of the conditions, the way Mar were playing, the way that the fight back came from Hawick, because they looked like nerves had got the better of them. But the character that they've shown, not just at the weekend past, but the all season, is remarkable. And it's great character to shake off the cobwebs that perhaps lingered from the weekend as well, to put on a South jersey, because it was a great event on Tuesday night. About 1,500 people at Netherdale to support the South.
1,514 exactly.
Oh, 1,514?
Yes.
Oh, right. So another Hawick start there, isn't it? So, it was great. It was just a great atmosphere. It was a great buzz. Personally, it was an absolute privilege to commentate on a South game. I just loved the whole atmosphere. So the Hawick players obviously going back to back, big week for them. But it wasn't just all about the Hawick players. There was players in that team, the likes of Bruce McNeill, who showed exactly his class, and his experience. Even when we're talking about after the loose leg in the ruck, and we even joked on commentary that'll be Bruce McNeill, confirmed as Bruce McNeill. But Craig Dodds as well. One of the standout performers for me on the day. His composure and his guile with his kicking. It was a brilliant display personally from him. So it wasn't just all about Hawick. It was the rest of the border clubs as well. Struan Hutchison playing well. Bruce Colvin too. So it was a great evening's rugby during the week, but it was a great addition after the final as well on Saturday.
Well, let's start with Hawick then, because it was 6-3 at half-time, a very under par Hawick is sort of a kind way of putting it, I suppose. I think Matty Douglas put it slightly differently at half-time. But the thing was that with about 5 minutes to go to the break, you saw suddenly a little bit of sunlight through the rain, didn't you? You could see that they'd won a scrum early on and they started attacking. And of course the other thing was that Mar had thrown absolutely everything at Hawick and got just 6 points for their efforts. And we just felt at half-time in the commentary box that, they've ridden the storm. It was a bad performance in the first half, but it will be very, very different after the break, and so it proved.
Yeah, it was a completely different second half. I think Mar's game plan that came out similar to Curry. Curry came at the final at the Premiership with a game plan, and it almost worked. For Mar, it was working to a point, but I think the Hawick players perhaps got to about 30 minutes, 35 minutes, and thought, if we can play like this against one of the top teams in Scottish rugby and only be 3 points behind, I think that's when the confidence starts coming back in, and the players go, look, we have been gifted half an hour, in a cup final, in front of the spectators in the stand, but also online and listening in. They've been gifted the opportunity to get back into it. In the halftime team talk turned it around as well. They were a positive vibe in the dressing room that comes back out, and the players who perhaps weren't performing in the first half. Kirk Ford was quiet, he let some balls bounce. Jay Linton was a bit sloppy in possession. There probably wasn't that physical composure and doggedness from Hawick in the first 30 minutes, but in the last 50 it just completely changed, and we've seen the Hawick that we've perhaps known throughout the season. But they've been in games so far this season that they've perhaps not been in positions that they deserve to win, but they still win, and I think that's the mark of a great team. But then in the first half, it was the bounce of a ball can make that task difficult, because those balls that have been pung up in the air by Mar, if they bounce a different direction, open field, all of a sudden Mar going for a 7-pointer, it's a different game. When you put that on the other side, and Rory McKean is obviously certain nailed on try. The bounce of a ball, and the bounce of a ball in a decision goes in Hawick's favour. That's sport, and that's the beauty of it. As a neutral, I'm not a Hawick fan or a Mar fan, I'm a rugby fan. And watching that game, it was intriguing to watch. And even the fallout and the discussion after it, was it a try? And that's what sport's all about. You get to elite level, amateur level, every single level of sport. And I think it was great. But for Hawick's performance, especially the second 40 minutes, their big players stood up. Their Sean Muirs, I think Sean Fairbairn's been a a brilliant player. Stuart Graham was remarkable. Callum Rennick and Jay Linton turned his performance round as well. So, great performance from Hawick.
And in rugby, you make your own luck, of course, as well. I mean, obviously, the first try, Ronan McKean, we've looked at it from the angle. It wasn't a try, but there's no TMO there, so you play with the rules. And similarly, the kick out from Marr, which was deflected into the arms of Fraser Rennick. So and he runs in for a try. All of a sudden, 14 points and bang.
Yeah, it was a quick spin and it was a quick turnaround, but it was just pressure. It was that pressure from Hawick that made that. But you're right, you do make your own luck, but we have to remember that behind all those talented players and the way that they were performing, be it under par or excelling in the second half, there was a game plan from Hawick as well. Mars was evident. They wanted to try and force mistakes from Hawick, play in the right areas. Sturgeon was kicking well. But there was a game plan from Hawick, and it's the pressure and it's the defensive pressure that they put on teams. It's the forcefulness that they play with their front eight, with their forwards. They like to squeeze teams and really put them under pressure, and that started to show in the second half. Marr were on the ropes, and with that kick through, the Jacobson, just that kind of indecision that Hawick perhaps never shown in the first half, because even though there was a little bit of indecision, they were not punished for it. But the indecision from Marr was punished. Ronan McKean grabs the ball, kicks downfield, races in, dots it down supposedly, and then they get the score. But again, the pressure for the second try is textbook rugby. Pin teams back into their own area, force them to play rugby, and as soon as they make a mistake, you feed off the scraps. And there's nobody better. Stuart Graham with a great charge down, putting his body on the line, and Fraser Rennick difficult to stop from 20 metres out, never mind 10. So he just barrels over for a try, and it was great from there. As I said before, throughout the whole season, I've been thoroughly impressed by the way Hawick have composed themselves and carried themselves as a club and a team. And I think they deserve everything that they've got this season.
A word about Marr as well, because I've kind of been around the Marr club for a number of years now, probably a decade, and got to know some of them very, very well. The bigger staffs, obviously, and Craig Redpath as director of rugby and coach for a long, long time. And there was absolutely no whinging, no moaning about the results, or was it a try, was it not? They accepted the results. They congratulated Hawick, and very, very big of them, I think.
Yeah, I think if you look on Twitter, there was obviously some people watching it with some comments, but there's always going to be, and that's what I mean about sport. It was interesting and intrigue watching the fallout, but I think that they were gracious in defeat. Even tweets from the players that you're looking at, it was sometimes maybe disappointed about the overall occasion, which is something that you can speak about at length, but they were gracious in defeat. I think they knew they were the second best team on the day, and they got a chance to play at Moneyfield, something that Marr, have not been able to do in the cup final, in a cup competition. But some great players. The Johnson brothers the twins are great players. The Bickerstaffs are phenomenal. Sturgeon's a great player. They've got a lot of Baird's a good scrum half as well. Front row that have been really strong over the years. But Marr have been successful. They've won the Premiership. They've come from the depth of Scottish rugby, and they have their own great story. But unfortunately in sport, somebody has to win and somebody has to lose, and on this occasion Marr lost, but it doesn't take any shine away from their grace as a club. I really like them as a club. I think they've been really refreshing. So it's just one of those things, one of those occasions, and I'm sure next year Marr will dust themselves off, and they've got a great appetite for rugby. At the West, Ayr have dominated it for so many years, and now there's another team looking to put their hand up to say, look, we are, well, I'll say put their hand up, they are the dominant side on the west side of Scotland at the moment, with Ayr being in National 1, so, they certainly flew the flag for the west of Scotland, but came up second best in the day.
But Hawick are the Invincibles, that's the bottom line, which is a hell of an achievement to go through the season unbeaten, not just in the Premiership, but obviously in the Cup as well, just literally unbeaten. Yeah,
because you've got to go to Millennium, you've got to go to Rayburn Place, you've got to go to Fullerton, you've got to go to all these places in that camp. You've got to go to Riverside, you've got to go to Philiphaugh for border teams is difficult. Going to Braidhome's not easy. So these places that they've had to go, Stony Hill, these are Golden Acre. I think I've named them all now, have I?
I think so.
That was almost a test.
Glasgow Hawks, how about Ballgrey?
Ballgrey, thank you, because that's the only one I probably wouldn't have known.
They keep moving it.
Exactly.
We've actually been to Ballgrey. We've been to Hewenden, and we've been to that police club, I think, which was near Cartha Queen's Park. But,
the Glasgow
never been to Ballgrey yet.
Glasgow Hawk Nomads, but it's they're difficult places to go. And I started speaking there, just thinking about, like the top 4 are difficult, and then you bring in the Borders clubs, they're difficult. But like JHA, for years have built, their success, obviously relegated this year, but they've built a lot of their success off a solid home form. It's a difficult place to go, and I've played there before. So it's a remarkable achievement for Hawick to go the whole season unbeaten. You got to remember that first game as well. I remember sitting before the season speaking to you, Stuart, and thinking about where teams are going to be and how it's going to... And I always say the same thing, it takes a while for a league to settle. But after that first weekend with the draw, I worried for all of our Border clubs, if I'm being honest, because I thought that was almost the leveller. And all the Border clubs have performed remarkably in the Premiership this season. But Hawick, were able to take that really difficult game against Selkirk and build it as their foundation to learn from initially, go to places, and when they've been in difficult games, they've seen it through. But also when they've been in games that should on paper be difficult, they've absolutely pummeled the teams. You think about the big victories on the road at Rayburn Place and Millennium as 2 real standout. Mar as well. They've had sizable victories on the road, and if you can win on the road, every other team will look down that league and say, I'm not looking forward to going to Mansfield, because it's a horrible place to play rugby, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. Teams detest going there because of the atmosphere and the team that you play. Hawick are a different beast at home, but on the road this season they've been so consistent, and from everything that I said before, went about their business well, being composed, not got ahead of themselves, got on with the job in hand. And I think that's the real marker of going the whole season unbeaten is being grounded, and that's exactly what Hawick have been. Maybe not when you see all the cups now, celebrating the players, enjoying themselves, absolutely love to see it. But they deserve all that now, because they've been so well managed, well coached. Their personal discipline as well, not to get ahead of themselves in their own right. They're amateur players. So, in terms of where they've came from at the start of the season to go unbeaten is a huge achievement.
And particularly when you think of the second game after Selkirk, I mean, they were actually, I think I'm right in saying they were nilled in the second half at Jedforest. Jedforest won 12-0 or something on that. And it was because of that, bizarrely, that the one trophy they haven't got is the Border League Cup this year. And similarly, you could say the same with Kelso, because Kelso didn't get in the Border League final either. Top of the National 1, top of the Premiership, didn't make the final of the Border League. Absolutely bizarre.
Yeah, and I think at the time, I was obviously, I'd thoughts about the Border League a year or so ago about splitting it into your pools and having your Premiership Border League, and then obviously your Nat 1, and then it would be a final. Turns out it worked out that way anyway. It's just not the best teams went through. And when I did the calculations last year, it would have been almost the same scenario. I don't know whether I'm a fan of that now, because I don't know whether that's off the back of the final, because the final, was great, the 2 teams that took part, but perhaps wasn't the best final. Not to say Hawick and Kelso would give you a better final, but it's good for the region that Hawick perhaps haven't been as dominant, because it means that everybody else has a fighting chance to have something. Kelso have had success in the league, Selkirk Border League winners, and then the double for Hawick. And you even look at the Kings of the Sevens table, which we'll come on to shortly. Perhaps there's going to be another Border team, with their name on that trophy. So it's great to see the silverware spread about, because there's a chance that 3 of those trophies anyway could have went anywhere else in the country. But it's just we're lucky that they're here in the Borders.
Now, the overall club captain at Hawick is Matty Carrier. Obviously, on the pitch, it's shared with Sean Muir, and Sean's done a wonderful job. But as you revealed last Saturday during commentary, Matty Carrier is no longer going to be playing for Hawick. He's going back to Peebles. He's kind of always said that he wanted to end his career. What I think was quite good from my point of view when we interviewed him after the South game on Tuesday night, when we were talking about this, he said that he thinks he's still got 2 or 3 years left in him, which is great news if Peebles are listening to that.
Yeah, I think I hinted at the fact it might have been his last game. I don't think I broke the news. But yeah, I did hint. I got wind of it. Matt is a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine. And I've had conversations with him over the last few number of years when it comes to this time. Just speaking about him. And not trying to offer advice, but just acting as a soundboard for him, because sometimes, if you're speaking to somebody in a club, they want to give you your club's opinion. Like, I don't have a club opinion, even though I played my rugby at Peebles. I would say my advice to Matty would be first for Matty, not for anybody else. He took no heed of it over the last 2 years anyway. But I think in hindsight, he has made the complete right decision for him. You look at it from the outside in, Matty was he's a club captain. He's a captain of Hawick at the start of the season. He has played a bit part in the team as well. You know, he's been on the bench a lot of the times because of Ross Graham and Fraser Rennick being there. So he's perhaps not started a lot of games, but his impact that he's had on that squad has been remarkable. And he perhaps flirted with the idea, with the competition that was there, to maybe not stay at Hawick last season. And he has made the conscious decision, I'm staying at Hawick because I want to have another shot at Scotland club. I want to try and win trophies and I want to win something. And he's led the club really well, I think, in my opinion. His decision has paid off brilliantly for him, and he deserves every bit of success that he's got, because it's a difficult thing, but it's a great balancing act that they've done. Him and Sean Muir are good mates, and there's such a respect there. Some other clubs, if there's that disharmony whether a captain's not playing, that's not Matty's nature. Matty likes to dig in, he likes to try and prove people wrong, he's a hard worker, and you know, he's had a huge impact off the bench, and obviously playing for the South as well. You know, he is one of the best hookers in the region. He's just difficult that he's at a club that have an abundance of them as well. So I'm proud of him, glad that he's got the success as well, but I'm looking forward to seeing him back at Peebles.
And I think with Sean Muir as well, because I mean he was talking about giving it all up, but he'd give it one more go because he could see that, you know, that they were on the brink of doing something special this year, and it's great that he has managed to stay injury free largely as well, which has always been a problem for him in the past. And now he's talking about, I want to go on and get even more in the 150th year celebration. So great news for all Hawick fans to know that Sean's going to give it another go.
Yeah, and I think it was great to see him back. We discussed about how many carries he does, you know, in most games. He's a huge ball carrier for Hawick. You know, a lot of their attack is around Sean Muir, trying to break through, drawing a couple of guys in. He acts as a good pivot. He's got great skill set. He would have been a huge loss to that team if, you know, he was to step back. But you think about it, you look at the names, Nicky Little coming back as well. You've got Fraser Rennick and Ross Graham coming back, Callum Rennick staying there. There's not been a lot of players depart. Sutton's come back, Redpath's come back, Linton is there, Mitchell still plays at Hawick. Now that just screams to me that there's a brilliant culture there, because there's other options for those players, but they choose to stay at Hawick, and they choose to stay there to try and get success. And that for me just shows the kind of camaraderie that they've got as a group. And obviously the influence that the likes of Graham Hogg, Matty Douglas, Lewis Bertram are given to that squad as well. So you could mention Sean Muir, you could mention Matty Carrier staying, you could mention all the players coming back, but the crux of it is the fact that they've got a brilliant culture there at Hawick.
Ethan Riley won't be there next year. He's gone back to Australia, taking Rory McLeod with him for some great experience out there down under. But, of course, he has to be replaced. The good thing about it is that, you know, there'll be a lot of good players out there who would want to play in a Hawick side that is unbeaten all season. So Hawick can dangle a few carrots there to get a replacement.
Yeah, Ethan Riley, we spoke about it at the Cup final. He was a complete find. You know, he's been one of the biggest signings for any club over the last decade. I can remember, you know, there was debate when we were at the Cup final whether he's had the biggest influence of an import on any club side in the Borders. Difficult to argue. Everybody will have their own case, everybody will have their club's own story, but a remarkable player, really, really skillful, really good. And he was described as the last piece of the jigsaw for Hawick, and I just can't argue with it, because he was remarkable. Their change, he got that debut at Philippoch when he came on. You know, Grant Huggin was playing there. Grant Huggin's a good player in his own right. Ethan Riley's a different class. And I think Grant Huggin will benefit from the experience that he's had with Ethan Riley. So whether Grant Huggin is ready to then cement his place in that squad, that remains to be seen next year. But with success, as Melrose have seen over years gone by, Gala when they started surging through the leagues, you know, with success becomes the attraction for players to go there and get a part of that. They want to be involved in successful teams. Nobody really goes down to a team because they like the attraction of a relegation battle. I don't know many people who've done that. It's the fact that they're fighting on all fronts for trophies. The Hawick team, well connected as well. They'll be, you know, speaking to a few players, seeing if they're interested in representing Hawick next year. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of changes in personnel. You know, I think there'll be a movement of some players, but Hawick, if they can maintain the crux of that squad that they've got, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with again next season.
And of course we must mention Matty Douglas as well, who's featured in every programme, I think, on the Friday preview, and we're kind of running out of superlatives to compliment him with, because once again gets the cup final on the Saturday, and then on the Tuesday he's head coach of the South, who haven't been beaten at all in the resurrection of the South in 2009. They've played 5 games now and 5 wins, and they went behind once again at the start, which is what's happened in every one so far.
You go from what Hawick have done and then go straight into Tuesday night, and we talk about culture and we talk about, personnel, right people, right time. Matty Douglas, his character, I don't know him well. I know him to say hi and speak to him, congratulate and wish him all the best for his success and what have you, and have a bit of crack. But I think that he is a driven person. Just when I look at him, he's a player that he's a guy that wants to be a coach, and he carries himself really well. He's professional in his his application to that. So you go into Tuesday night and we talk about culture and getting people together. I think it's a little bit easier in the Borders than perhaps other areas of the country, but you just seen it in that squad on Tuesday night. They were clicking, they knew their patterns, they were mostly hitting their targets, they were accurate, they were clinical, they were physical as well. They won pretty much every little battle on the field against Edinburgh. And that comes from the coaching staff there, like say Greg and Chisholm, but also Douglas as well.
So he's going to be, we presume, at Hawick again next year. And of course, he's young enough to, spend a couple of years in the Premiership and learn even more before moving up, which he inevitably will.
Yeah, I think the South is good experience for him. He's 28-year-old, I believe, which is unbelievable that he's coaching some players that are, maybe 5 years as senior. So it's good that he commands that respect from other players. Hopefully he gets that respect from other players, but it's evident from the outside looking in that he does get that. And there's opportunities for somebody like him. He's young enough, he's driven enough, he's hungry enough, and he's been successful enough initially for people to be peering over the fence saying, let's have a little look at this guy. It might be the step up to go and do Super Series next. It might be the club international team, something like that. Something to really nail down, his position, if it's something that he ultimately wants to do. Because you look at the opportunities now in Scottish rugby. If you're the right character and you're the right person at the right time, you could quite easily find yourself in some setup somewhere. Like there's a lot of skill-specific coaches, a lot of opportunities in professional and international rugby. I don't think I'm outlandish by saying, in the next decade or so, Matty Douglas could, if he progresses in the same trajectory, could end up in a position like that. He could be 38, going on 40, and he could be in a position that he's got a great CV, that he's looking at being part of some sort of coaching setup in professional or international rugby. And I'm sure that's what he's driving towards. But, I don't think it's unfathomable that we're going to see him go that way.
We must mention Bruce McNeill, because he's still looking incredibly fit and healthy out there and contributing. That's the main thing. He did another 80 minutes at the age of now 39, going on 40. Didn't look out of place at all. Another appearance for the South for him. He's the only one now who's played in every single game for the South since 2009.
Yeah, he really surprised me, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, I know what Bruce, I've played against him, and I've watched him for many years now, so I know what to expect of him. And I think I was probably quite blinkered by the fact that he wasn't playing in the Premiership. And probably the same, I can mention Stuart and Hutchison as well, because you probably think that, the different levels, sometimes you feel that players in the Premiership perhaps just have that little bit more exposure at top level rugby at that time. Bruce has got a huge, and so Struan, I've got a huge CV at top level rugby, but time passes, and I think the performance that Bruce McNeill put in, he used every ounce of experience, every ounce of physicality. His skill set was accurate. Just those little subtle things that he was doing. He was a nuisance. Difficult to bring down. He got his try as well, which was great. So, he put in a great performance, but he is probably looking in some of the best shape that I've seen him since I've been doing the commentary. So, I've seen him in Hawick colours, see him in Kelso colours now, and then you see him in the South, and he looks on the same par as the likes of Liam Scott and Jay Linton, who are younger than him, but he is, showing his experience, and it was a great performance from him.
And got to mention Craig Dodds. I thought he was absolutely superb off the tee, of course, as well, apart from the first conversion which went astray, but it was on the touchline, so we'll give him that, even though he is a kicking coach. But he was brilliant in everything he did.
Yeah, he was probably my player of the match. I know there wasn't really, in our coverage, there wasn't really a player of the match. We were mentioning a few. Bruce McNeill would have been one of them as well, by the way, but I would have said that Craig Dodds was it. Some of his passing, the positions that he found himself in attack, not just in the bits where he was, kicking and downfield, or the little kick to Dwayne Patterson. He always seemed to find himself in loads of space and really ignite up, some wider passages of play. There's bits where they were involved with the likes of Ronan McKean coming off his wing and trying to bring the likes of Mitchell, and they gelled really, really well. I've always said on commentary with Craig Dodds, over the years, his basic skills, his standard skills, have got better and better. His pass accuracy, when to pass, the type of pass to put in, his kicking, his angles of kicking, when to kick as well. He done everything blob on, apart from missing that conversion. But he was a 9.5 out of 10 on Tuesday evening.
And it's interesting because I did actually, when you were on the pitch at the end of the match, you didn't know this, but we actually decided who would be our man of the match, and we all went for Craig Dodds, and it's interesting that you've actually said that as well. So all 5 of us in the commentary team went for Craig Dodds, a National 1 player.
Yeah, but again, I think it just comes down to the way that he played. Sometimes the game suits you as well. But I just think the style of play that the South were playing fell straight into Craig Dodds' hands, because it was very forward orientated. It was physical. They wanted to try and bully Edinburgh, and then when they have bullied them and started to ragdoll them a little bit, Craig Dodds was just pinging them downfield, and that meant that they could then put the pressure further up the pitch. And Craig Dodds kicking put them in those areas, which meant that Edinburgh had to always panic. They never looked like they knew what they wanted to do. They were always constantly trying to figure out what they had to do to get out of danger or get away from the South. And the South just always looked like they knew. They were like, right, let's ping them into the 22. They'll throw into the line out. If they overthrow, we'll be on it. But if they bring it down, we'll be on them. And when they ping it back to the 10, we'll get up and we'll harry them. And hopefully the kick isn't that long, and then we've got the ball back and we'll start attacking. And that's all from forward play and having a good 10-12 axis, both who can kick. Struan Hutchison putting a lot of contestable kicks up in the air, but Craig Dodds was kicking to the corners a lot and looking to find that space. Colvin kicked really well as well. Although this first kick was almost penalised because Wells got the ball out and then the counter-attack from Edinburgh. But the 9, 10 and 12 kicked really, really well. And Kirk Ford as well at fullback.
I'll tell you what was also interesting to me was the fact, you had the Hawick players who had just literally won the cup final on the Saturday, and to a man, everyone wanted to play for the South. You could have excused them for saying, oh, yeah, I can't get myself up again in 3 days' time for something like this. But to a man, they all wanted to play for those red and white stripes, and it was so apparent. It's
been a while, since the real culture of the South has been kind of revitalised. Yes, they've come back in a couple of times as one-off games, but there's a different feel about this one. This feels like this is something that the amateur players can really aim at to represent their region, and the fact that there's such a young cohort of players completely willing to buy into this straight off the bat is remarkable, because obviously there's some players perhaps in that squad who might be missing. It might be because they've not been selected, it might be because they've got other commitments on, but the majority of players there completely buy into this. And I think that is the remarkable thing, that there's been such a distance between when the South were the South, like in the amateur era, to the South now. You wouldn't really notice much of a difference in appetite, because the players are all desperate to play for the region. And I think it's because the changes that have went through over the last few years, there's not been a lot of opportunities for people to play for anybody other than their club, unless you're at the top tier of Scottish rugby. We've talked about it there. The National 1 players were getting a shot. Even in the Edinburgh team, the Stu Mel players, who have had a horrific season, are able to put on an Edinburgh jersey and play at Netherdale on a beautiful evening in front of 1,500 spectators. It's a brilliant occasion. But I think the appetite from the South players was brilliant, because they looked hungry. They looked well drilled, but they looked hungry. They looked like they've studied what they needed to do in that game, and they implemented it brilliantly. Now they've only got 11 days to prepare for the final, which is happening at Braidholme, which is a GHA's ground. And of course, GHA very much driving the inter-district return along with Hawick and other clubs as well. So it's going to be at Braidholme. There's the losers match. So obviously Edinburgh have lost. We know that tomorrow it will be Glasgow and West against Caledonia Reds. And that's taking place at Highland on the 3G pitch there. So the winner will take on the
the South, and the loser will take on Edinburgh. So both games are being played on the same day, one at 12:30 at Braidholme and the other one at 3 o'clock, which is when the South will be playing against either Caledonia Reds or Glasgow and West. Who would you prefer?
I've kind of looked at both squads, and I don't think there's much really to pick between them, to be fair. I know obviously there's the Mar contingent in the Glasgow team. You look at both teams, though, they've had to kind of pick from elsewhere. Glenn Brough playing for Cali Reds, so they've had to pick players from elsewhere. Now that's great, but I just look at both teams. I think the South are a stronger squad on paper, and even if there's some personnel not available, I think the replacements that they've got in that squad, they've got plenty of players to pick from. If you go by our opinion, there's plenty of quality players, but I feel that in some positions for the other teams they're slightly weaker.
Of course, there will be a few unavailabilities for that particular match, so there will be some changes being made. But what was good was that Matty gave all the squad a really good run out. They had at least 25 minutes. The bench was changed, the front row was changed straight after the Fraser Rennick try. So the new front row came on, did the job as well. The
one thing I do hope is that whatever happens on the 21st of May, I just hope there's a big crowd. I hope there's a big crowd and it's well publicised, and there's a real advert for club rugby, because obviously a lot of conversation about the coverage that it gets, and I compliment you pretty much on the daily of the coverage that you give. But I think that there's something really needs to be done about really showcasing the quality of Scottish club amateur rugby, because that was a remarkable game on Tuesday. I don't expect anything different on the 21st of May. So both games, and hopefully it's a big crowd. It's maybe something to consider, is get yourself to Braidholme and watch the game, because it'll be brilliant.
But if you can't make it, then of course we're live from Braidholme. 2:30 will be on air. Plenty of time to preview that one. 3 o'clock kickoff, and we're certainly looking forward to that. It will be the South taking on either Glasgow and West or Caledonia Reds. Exclusive radio commentary on Borders Rugby Radio, and that will be our final show of the season as well. Well, the day before, of course, we're at the Selkirk Sevens at Philip Hawke, but tomorrow it's the Jedforest Sevens, which is normally the last of the 10 tournaments that make up the Kings of the Sevens, but because the King's coronation clashed with the original Selkirk Sevens date, they moved theirs to May the 20th, and they will end the series, but that's like a one-off for this year only. And I think Jed and Selkirk have had long chats about that one, and it's all very, very amicable for this season. But Jed will be returning next year to finish off the Kings of the Sevens series in their usual place. Now, Melrose can win the K7's title tomorrow if they win the Jedforest Sevens, but if not, it's going to go down to the wire, and one of 4 teams can still win the series. Melrose on 45, there's Gala on 37, Watsonians and Embrackis tied on 29 points apiece. And of course, the other interesting thing in the equation is that Melrose will be taking on Watsonians in round 1, and if Watsonians win that, then, my goodness, it's wide open.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that's been the exciting thing about the Kings of the Sevens this year. You look, and there's nobody won a tournament twice, so and there's a real chance that the host team could win their own tournament as well. If Jed and Selkirk win it, I would imagine there's never been a Kings of the Sevens where somebody's not won 2 tournaments. It would be some feat to go through and have such a level playing field. But this weekend's going to be really interesting. There's obviously a lot that can happen at the weekend with that first, the first tie for Melrose against Watsonians. They're joint third. Obviously unrealistic that they're going to win it, the Kings of the Sevens, but there's certainly still a real threat there for Melrose that they could be put out in the first round. And if they do that, it opens it up for everybody else to try and squeeze up the gap up at the top. So it's going to be an interesting weekend, and everybody will be, still chasing Melrose, but they've been really consistent. Obviously 2 runners-ups, 1 win as well, getting to the latter rounds and the semis as well, so on 3 occasions. So Melrose are consistent, so they'll know what's ahead of them against Watsonians, and they'll be wanting to try and get as many points out of this weekend as possible so they can relax a little bit going into the Selkirk round.
Well, the first tie is Edinburgh against Peebles. Malta against Hawick, who are an unknown quantity. And if you're looking for an outside bet for another 9th team to win, we don't know how good they're going to be, so that's going to be very interesting. They've got Hawick in the first round. Then it's Watsonians against Melrose, Boroughmuir against Langham, and a real chance, I think, for Langham to do well in this tournament against Boroughmuir. Then we go into the lower half of the draw. Curry against Jedforest, and Curry great at 15s. They haven't really shone at 7s. I think that's been fair to say. Berwick will take on Selkirk, Musselburgh against Kelso, and then Highland against Gala. And again, if Highland turn over Gala, it's all over for Gala, and probably Melrose, will go on to take the title. But some interesting ties there.
Yeah, definitely. I think you look at that Jed Curry tie. Now, I don't know what kind of squad Curry will bring down, but they do have a lot of dangerous players. But you just did allude to it there, Stuart, and the fact that they've not really, hit the ground running at 7s. You see a lot of the Edinburgh teams are going to a lot of these other 7s tournaments at Musselburgh and Howe Fife and things like that. North Berwick 7s, they're getting teams there. Like the Heriots won at Musselburgh at the weekend, I believe. So it's always difficult to try and predict the other Edinburgh teams, if you know what I mean. I think we know what's coming from Edinburgh Accies. We know Watsonians will be strong, like the Fisher in there as well. So, they'll be strong squads, but a lot of interesting games. I think one of the most interesting games might be the first one. Edinburgh Accies have been brilliant so far this season, but just been a little bit indifferent. And Peebles beat them down at Langham, but then the Peebles have then been absolutely battered by Gala on 2 occasions following that. So they can beat teams, but they've just not been consistent enough. And if Peebles are able to get through that tie, you wonder how far they can go in that tournament. And I genuinely believe that. They're possible semi-finalists there on that card, but I'm sure Hawick will have a lot to say. It'll be interesting to see what Team Hawick bring as well against Malta, unknown quantities. Will Hawick start to load first 15 players back into the squad to have a real run at it, or will they reward the players that have been serving them so well throughout the Kings of the Sevens? It's always difficult to try and predict, but a lot of interesting ties in there. I think certainly the first one there, Edinburgh Accies Peebles, will be quite an interesting tie. And Jed Curry, I think the bottom half of the draw, it'll be a test for Jed in the opening round, because if they lose a bit of discipline, it could be a long afternoon for them.
They certainly can, and Peebles, of course, have been. I think they've played Gala nearly every tournament. It's been extraordinary, apart from the Melrose one, and they'll be absolutely thrilled that Gala at the bottom half, right at the bottom half, and Peebles right at the top. So they could meet in the final. Peebles Gala. Do you fancy that?
Yeah, that'd be good. It would be good for the Kings of the Sevens as well. I just think Peebles perhaps deserve a bit of a reward for their Sevens efforts this year. They've got a good squad, well led by Ian Chisholm, and I think that is the basis of it all. That they've actually got a bit of rugby guidance, and I've said it about Peebles before. They've sometimes just lacked that real commitment from a coach or from somebody to take the Sevens seriously. So it's great to see that Ian Chisholm is doing that, and it is being rewarded by good form, but just falling away, probably that little bit. Remember, they're a Nat 2 team, so maybe in this occasion the leagues do tell the full story, and there's that little bit of lack of real quality compared to the teams up above. But they've been good. Hawick have stuck in as well. Hawick are above Peebles in the Kings of the Sevens table with playing mostly a second string team. So there's certainly a lot of interesting ties there, but the border teams mostly have performed quite well, as shows by the league table. Many different winners this season.
And very, very close. I mean, you look at 5th Kelso, 24 points, 9th Peebles, 19 points, just 5 points separating 5 clubs. So that could still change round with 2 to go. You won't be at Jedforest, so you're going to Liverpool, aren't you? You're for the Saturday. Eurovision Song Contest for you, is it?
Yeah, we've got tickets to the Eurovision Song Contest, that's it. No, I've got my good friends at Stag Do down in Liverpool, so Haydock Races it is. So any tips, send them my way, because I don't have a clue about horse racing.
Well, good luck with that, certainly. Right, let's hear from Struan Hutchison now, the captain of Melrose, who, as we said earlier, could clinch the actual Kings of the Sevens title if they win the Jed one. Let's have a listen to hear what he has to say.
The squad are really looking forward to getting back together this weekend to compete at the Jed Sevens following the weekend off for the King's coronation. The squad's full of confidence and go into the tournament with some good form, picking up 15 points at the double-header weekend, winning Kelso Sevens and narrowly losing our semi-final to Gala at Earlston. We also head into the tournament 8 points clear of Gala, who currently sit behind us in the Kings of the Sevens tournament. So we know that they're going to be looking to try and catch up some points. And with us and them in separate halves of the draw, we'll be keeping a close eye on how they progress throughout the day. First up for us, we've got Watsonians, who we narrowly beat at Berwick Sevens earlier on in the series, but we know what challenges and threats they're going to bring. They're currently joint third in Kings of the Seven, so fairly young squad. They work hard for each other, so it's certainly going to be a tough opening game for us. We could also meet Edinburgh Accies in the semi-final. They'll also be looking to close the gap on us, and they'll bring their own challenges and threats. So certainly a tough draw for us, but we're very much looking forward to it. Following the double-header weekend, we took the Tuesday off and boys just rested and recovered. We've then trained last Thursday and then Monday, Thursday this week, just to allow boys to go down and support the South. Andrew Nagel, Archie Pilcher and Matthew Klein have all trained this week, and they'll be looking to make a comeback into that 10-man squad from injury. However, I think some of the players we had during that double-header weekend at Kelso Earlston went really well. The likes of Harry Mikowski, Rolly Brett and Connor Spence, so they'll all be looking to kind of hold on to that starting jersey. So the squad's in a really good place. We've trained well these last few sessions. We're really looking to try and get one hand on that Kings of the Sevens trophy, and if we can go well at Jed, then hopefully we'll be in a really good position to get the club's first Kings of the Sevens trophy since 2014. So we're well aware of what we need to do, and guys are certainly focused on it. But yeah, we're looking forward to the challenges that we've got along the way, and we'll see how we get come 6:30 on Saturday evening.
It's going to be very, very interesting. And I have to confess as well, I thought whatever was going to happen was going to go down to the wire. But it was only sort of fairly recently that I did the mathematics. If Melrose win it, they're on 55. That's unassailable, because even if Gala finish runner-up to them at Jed, that gives them 7 points. And even if Gala win at Selkirk with 10 points and Melrose go out, well, they're 1 point short, and that gives you the stat.
Such an interesting draw when you look at the Kings of the Sevens table, because realistically looking at that, you think that Melrose are at least going to get to a semi-final and potentially play Edinburgh Accies, And I don't mean that to any discredit to the likes of Malta or Hawick, because I'm saying that because I don't know much about Malta. Hawick have been mostly second team players, so I've never seen their full squad yet, so it's hard to make a call. You're going on form so far. Peebles might upset Edinburgh Accies, and then it's a different scenario. I'm sure they'd love a crack at Melrose to try and test themselves as well, because they've not really met so far this season. So you're looking at that and thinking, well, there's 5 points there for them. Do they get through that semi-final? And then it's final. It's Cup Rugby after that. Like it's a one-off game. Gala, on the other hand, one of the more realistic. Well, the realistic competitor here, aren't they? Highland will be a difficult game to play, but then they go through that and they're going to be playing the likes of Kelso or Musselburgh. And Kelso have won a Kings of the Sevens tournament so far this year. If they manage to get their way through that, they're going to play Selkirk or Jed, two teams who haven't won a Kings of the Sevens tournament so far this year, which surprises you. So Gala are in. You look at the bottom half of that draw: Jed, Selkirk, Kelso, and Gala. Just speaking about the border teams, or the listed border teams there, on the bottom half of the draw, that is solid. It is so difficult because the level playing field so far this season in the Kings of the Sevens has been because of the border teams all kind of, getting one up on one another and being able to defeat them. Like you think back to that Melrose game against Jed at Berwick. I had a conversation before I left with somebody, and I just said, Jed will win. They'll be back. They get the full squad now, and they'll sail past everybody. How wrong was I? Melrose played them and played them off the park on that occasion, and that's the difficulty, because at the bottom half of that draw, it's so tight, and anybody there, Jed could beat Selkirk, Kelso could beat Gala, and then you can flip that for every other team. They could beat each other on any given day. Top half of the draw, probably not like that.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting, isn't it? Because, the weather's going to be great, fantastic. Jed is always a great event, as we always know. And, if you've got nothing to do tomorrow, then get down to Riverside Park, because, there's so much intrigue, so much things that can happen. I know all Selkirk will be wanting Gala to win, and Watson needs to put Melrose out so that they can, in their Selkirk Sevens finale, it can literally go down to the wire.
Yeah, it's going to be a good weekend, and I think that's what the Kings of the Sevens is all about. There's the rugby, right? There is the rugby side of it, and the teams play brilliant rugby. So if you're a rugby fan, go down, watch it, because you'll be entertained. If you want to socialise and have a bit of crack with some like-minded rugby folk, that'll be equally as entertaining. The sun will be shining, it'll be a really great event. The border clubs do such a great job at putting on a show for, their supporters, their spectators, their fans, their volunteers. And it's a big day for the club. Jedforest is a club. This is a huge day for them, and yeah, hopefully they get a sizable crowd, and they'll be hoping that they get a home victory as well.
There we are. Well, it should be really, really exciting, of course. As we said, you're going to miss it, but we've still got an A-team out. We've got Robin Purdy. We've got Graham Dodds, who's making his debut as a commentator tomorrow as well for the Melrose Watsonians game. So that's a plum tie for him. Neil Hinnigan will be there, Andrew Fleming and Hugh Brown as well at pitchside. So it's going to be a fun day, 5 hours of entertainment. But that's your lot for tonight. Don't forget, we'll be back tomorrow at 2 o'clock for the Jedforest Sevens live from Riverside Park. But for now, from Dale and I, bye for now.